welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Turned For. This time, life support. Yes, life support. DS9 on It's All Been Turned For. Hey, we're not on life support. We're rocking and rolling. We're well into, I don't know, what, year 9 maybe? You can support our life, and then we can give you life back with our shenanigans that you've been following along with us on here for hopefully a long time. Great way to do that, patreon.com/IABD. Go out there. It don't cost much, and you'll get treated like a VIP. That might even be a level. I should know these. You know what? That's me. I'm too busy researching the Seinfeld credits of guest stars on these shows. But I should allow some time for that. But anyway, the point is patreon.com/IAB. Come support us. Get all the bonus content. But the point of this is we're talking about life support. DS9 on It's All Been Trucked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trucked Before. Your skeleton crew is here.
This is Steven.
Jimmy-Jerome. And I say skeleton not because we have just bones, but because it's just the two of us. And that is the core skeleton of this podcast.
Yes, it is.
Even though we had Shane last week,
we're
going to have at least a pre-recorded bit for Shane next week. I think we're going to have Keith the next couple of weeks.
I think so.
We'll see. He said he was planning on it. So we'll go without him this week, but we're hoping to have some more voices. But for now, the two of us are on life support. Now we're going to talk life support. What were your first impressions of the episode?
First, lame title. I know it actually applies to the episode, but what another generic title.
I'm going to disagree with you there.
Yeah.
I can't be generic, but I struggle to think of another Star Trek episode you could apply it to.
Fair. That's a good point, I guess.
Other than maybe the one with Worf where he almost died.
Or maybe any Trill episode.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's some argument, but I do feel like this fit it better than any episode that's even come close to that realm. So I did not see this as generic title, but I apologize. I interrupted your...
No, I thought it was an interesting episode. Yeah, I read some things online that they didn't like the contrast between the A and B plot. I think I don't have a problem with it. I think it was
a bit jarring.
It was jarring, but if it was all the A plot, that might have been too much. And if it was all the B plot, that definitely would have been too much. Yeah. I thought we had some good moments. Non-visitor, great. Kira at the end. And of course, Louise Fletcher, always great. And I need to get his name down, Mr. Sadiq Bashir.
Alexander Siddig?
Yes, yeah. I thought they were all great, and I thought
still credited as Siddig El Fadl at this point, but
that's
halfway through the series, he'll change it to Alexander Siddig.
I mushed and messed up the names. But I thought, it didn't feel like, it could have felt like a Disease of the Week or a episode of ER or whatever, which I think was about to come on or just come on. Either way. But I thought, it was obviously the bigger picture and the context that was going on was more important. So, yeah, I enjoy is hard to say in an episode where this happens, but I thought it was I'm going to say pretty good. Just above good.
Pretty good.
Yes.
I liked it a lot. I think I mentioned to you in text form that I remember very vividly both these A and B plots, but did not remember that they were in the same episode, which did feel a bit jarring. The Jake plot was so silly, so after school special. Yeah. It was heartwarming, but it was... I do think it would have been stronger if it had been somewhere else and they just focused on the A. I mean, we've had some really strong DS9 episodes in the first two seasons that focused on something as important as the A story here without a silly B plot.
I liked the silly diversionary Nog and Jake, but I thought this one was so, like you said, and maybe that was a nod to Ms. Lark Voorhees, jumping on there, but
we'll definitely talk about her.
Also, like when she was on Saved by the Bell, underutilized here. So if it had been more about her and Jake than Jake and Nog, and I understand and I respect, and I definitely related to Jake and probably to Nog too, to some extent. Those relationships between, and I'll say boys, junior high and high school, can get as silly and strained like this as his relationship between a guy and a man and a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. But so I I wanted to enjoy it more. I thought it had some true moments, but the other side of the ledger, the A plot, I didn't. No show is perfect, but yeah, we'll jump into that. But I thought there was a lot going on, and Bashir really getting into the Hippocratic Oath, which we've seen McCoy and plenty of other and Crusher for sure getting into it, and I you know what, I'll get into that later. We'll jump in first. First, let me say my first note would be I love Paramount Plus's content because obviously all the Star Trek. I like all the Comedy Central, and you can get into old MTV stuff. And The Curse was a great show. If you haven't seen that, go watch that. It's weird, but I want to blame my remote and me being an old man, but I have trouble navigating. It's like, hey, I want to watch. It kicked me into like it was trying to make me watch Enterprise, and I'm like, that's not even on my. This is next for you. That's not a. We know you like Star Trek. Do you want to watch this? But anyway,
yeah.
So I'll start there.
No, it's fair. My first impression, I liked the silly B plot a lot. I think it could have been an A plot in another episode if you made a silly episode. It just felt forced in here. I agree. Mm-hmm. You could have developed it more, especially with the guest actors they had, or at least one of them. Mm-hmm. Overall, I will say, while I remember this, I'd forgotten how big the emotional impact of the conclusion and climax were. Yeah. And I was in tears finishing this episode. My daughter came home with 2 minutes left, and she crawled up on my lap and gave me a big hug because I was bawling.
And at some point I knew we were getting to that point, and then when and credit to Non-Visitor and everybody else involved, but that last scene, the very, very last scene especially, I was like, it got me in it, and I was surprised it did, and I was the same as you. I got very teary-eyed as well. So
it was a stellar effort. This is how you treat a reoccurring guest character, in my opinion, that we have time to get to know and develop. Mm-hmm. Let's start at the beginning of the episode. Jake is chatting up Leanne, played, as you mentioned, by Lark Voorhees, best known as Lisa Turtle on Saved by the Bell, as well as Saved by the Bell Hawaiian Style and Good Morning Miss Bliss. 3 of her 4 best known for IMDb's are for Lisa Turtle. The 4th being How High, which was a 2001 movie where she played a character named Lauren.
Yeah. I've never seen that. I want to see that.
Her last non-Saved by the Bell credit was 2012, acting-wise, but she did return for the 3 episodes of the Saved by the Bell reboot in 2020 and 2021, which I loved the first season of. I need to watch season 2.
I watched Saved by the Bell a lot, even though I was probably in my, when did it run? 90.
I was a kid, but I watched it a lot on TBS reruns. Jake's plot of trying to blow off Nog to go on this date with this girl, because he's still a boy, was totally relatable to me. I unfortunately admit that I blew off friends when I was younger for a date.
I would do it now.
I'm not proud. I would not do it now. I'm not proud of it, but definitely related to the plot. Going to the Klingon restaurant. Klingon must be like the hip food of the moment. I'm trying to think, what would that apply to now? Like, I love Indian food, but by now that's probably not hip enough. I'm not young and hip enough to know what's cool. Definitely Chinese is long past that.
I thought maybe Korean barbecue. I know that was hip for a while.
But that was hip like 15 years ago. What's the new cuisine that's hip in 2024 as this episode comes out in 2025 even? And I don't know.
think I'm hip enough to know, but
I don't know either.
I did write, I love a woman. She made the move. She's like, we should go out. And she sets the date in military time. So if anybody out there listening to the podcast wants to go on a date, feel free to make the move and feel free to put it in military time.
I set all my clocks to military time. It makes more sense than the 12-hour.
It does.
I would do everything in metric if society would let me.
It really
does.
But
society will let me put things in 24-hour time, so I do.
I guess we still call it military time, but is that what it is?
It's just a 24-hour clock, which makes way more sense than a 12-hour clock.
It totally does. All right, let's start the movement to make that
Well, we know that this country doesn't accept movements that make sense or are for their own good. We are
but if we
recording
can figure
this.
out what the hip food is and tie it to that, maybe we can get it going that way.
The transition of that really fun Jake and Lark Voorhees scene going into emergency. Oh my God, we're running. We're running. There's a shuttle. That was such a jarring transition. And had we saved the rest of Jake's story for another episode, I still would have approved of the cold open, because what a cool thing to be like, oh, fun teenage romance. Crap, people are like in trouble.
It's life on DS9. As soon as I saw Kai win, I just wrote, uh-oh.
To Kai Wynn's credit, and I don't give her much credit, but to her credit, at that point, she says, "See to the Vedic. I'm fine. See to the Vedic." Yeah. And that is one thing that makes her better than Trump. Is I know she had selfish reasons for caring what happened to Bareil, but I do think she actually would have preferred he survived for personal reasons as well.
Yes.
And maybe I'm giving her too much credit. But I do think she had grown to like him and is upset that he died.
I kept waiting for that somehow she was behind whatever happened.
No.
But
no, I'm glad they didn't go that way.
I am too. But I kept thinking it the whole time just because based on her history and stuff. But where they ended up going with it makes more sense because she's sly for sure.
But they rushed Bareil to sick bay or the hospital or whatever it's called, DS9. I honestly don't remember. And they put on the stupid, god awful red surgical scrubs with the hood.
Is this the first time we've seen those?
No, we saw them in Next Gen.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah.
But they're so bad. Star Trek in the 24th century does really, really bad surgical scrubs.
They look a lot like the I think I mentioned it then, the Friday's Child, the Tier,
I mean, McCoy had surgical scrubs in the original series, but it was just Scrubs version of his uniform.
Yeah.
It wasn't glowy red thing with a helmet.
Yeah, I don't know what that means because it doesn't cover their face. So it's not, what's it?
Well, I think it's to hold the hair back like a hairnet.
That makes
or
sense.
Like a surgical cap. Isn't that what a surgical cap does? Is keeps your hair out of it? McCoy never wore a surgical cap, but he was probably supposed to. He probably just didn't follow the regulations.
He didn't, that too.
But the whole outfit is just, it's, in my opinion, it is the most ridiculous Starfleet attire we see in the franchise.
That's fair.
Always hated it.
It looked fine, but I also love the costuming in Friday's Child, and I love Julia Newmar in that. Go listen to that episode if you want to hear what we think of that. But yeah, you're right. It was also kind of ridiculous. The nurse looked really good in it as well. It looked good on her, but
that was a nurse we've seen before and talked about before. Nurse Jabara, played by Anne Gillespie.
Yes.
I don't think this is her last appearance. No. Certainly not her first appearance. So we won't get into. We won't get into her too much. But
Jenny Garth's mom on 90210.
She was. I actually, this was her third of 4 appearances. So she'll only be back once more this season, unfortunately. Because I think she makes a great nurse, assistant, doctor, whatever.
Yeah.
Minutes into this episode, we're told Bareil's dead. Did you believe it?
I wrote down, is that a wrap on Bareil? And then I wrote yes. And then I wrote wait. And then I wrote, he's alive. And then
I wrote, he's dead or not.
I felt like there was no way he could be totally dead already, but
so obviously I knew this whole episode what was going on with him, but the first time I saw this, I totally believed it. And based on Star Trek up to this point, this was his 6th episode of the series. I could see them dismissing of a character that had been 6 episodes this unceremoniously, especially if they were all in on the win and didn't care about Bareil.
Yeah. And I thought about when he first dies, quote unquote. I was like, what a bummer.
Quote unquote, he did die.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Bareil, Bashir is just a genius doctor.
Yes. Yeah. But I was like, oh man, that the actor, they bring him back and they just carry him in dead, and then he's laying there and that's it. He's out. But then he gets to have some moments. Although I did read a couple of reactions to the episode where people just didn't love his performance, and maybe he was just like, I don't care. I'm out of here.
Philip Anglim is not a good actor. And I'm pretty sure this was his last acting credit. He only has 20.
Oh.
I did not open it up. Let me open it because I was looking at this earlier. Yeah, sorry, 15. And he does have one credit after this. He was in Dallas War of the Ewings, the TV movie in 1998, where he played Peter Ewing. Ellington. Sorry, Peter Ellington.
I think
he's not a good actor.
Yeah.
So the parts that are affecting about him in this episode are because of Alexander Siddig, Nana Visitor, and Louise Fletcher. The three of them make this episode phenomenal.
Yeah.
Philip Anglin, great. I don't think the show lost much by ditching him.
I've always thought he was just up to something, or the character was up to something based on his kind of weird, distant, but still putting the moves on Kira. I think you and the rest of the Trek community apparently may be right. He's just not great.
DS9 writers clearly didn't hate him because he actually does return for one more episode as Bareil.
Oh, okay.
In season 5, I believe. So, a couple years down the road, just like we have not seen, I told you Kaya Opaka returns one more time.
Yeah.
So, DS9's good about bringing people back. I will not tell you the circumstances or how it works out, but Bareil has one more notable appearance, as does Opaka, that we have not seen. I'm going to switch back because my next note is Jake and Nog, but I really think at this point, can we talk through the rest of our Jag?
Yeah.
That's their good couple name. Our Jag notes and leave them behind because going back and forth was jarring in the episode. It's going to be more jarring in this discussion. Nog wants a double date, is my note. He doesn't take the hint of Jake's blowing him off. Well, or maybe he does, but he's being a Ferengi and weaseling a benefit out of him.
At first I wrote down, I like his style. He's supporting his friend. And then, Jake even says, is this a rule of acquisition? And he's like, no, it's just this or that.
See, I clearly don't. I think it was clear that Nog's not being obtuse. He's weaseling a benefit out for himself.
Yeah, which I on some level I applaud that, but not what happened at the dinner.
It makes me sad because Nog has an evolution to undergo, and we're well into season 3, and it felt like, based on where he started and where he's going, I feel like he should be further along the evolution arc here.
Yeah.
There are a few hints in this episode that maybe dating is a blind spot and he's evolved in other ways.
Yeah.
And a lot of his other plot does not have to do with romance and dating. So I think that's part of the realism of the character. I love Aaron Eisenberg. I told you he's like the most frequent reoccurring character on the show.
Yeah.
And the arcs that are coming up for him are phenomenal. They're going to give Aaron Eisenberg, they're going to test his acting chops. This isn't that, but this is fun. He mentions, maybe I'll even wash my lobes.
Yeah.
The lobes for them are an erogenous zone.
Yeah.
In my opinion, based on the way they treat them every time they come up, they have to be equivalent to the testicles. Are you saying you only, if it's a special date, do you wash your testicles before you go on that date? Because I would wash my testicles before every date I would go on.
A friend of mine from long ago, I think she brought this up. This is a long time, but just the term the undercarriage, and it was in reference to a similar thing, like, I'm really going to make sure I wash my undercarriage tonight really well because I have a date or whatever.
It's like always, if you have a date, whether you expect that it's going to go there or not, you clean yourself thoroughly.
Yes.
That your body especially. You do not want to be in a situation where unless I will give a caveat, if that is a technique for you to make sure you don't get there.
Yes.
Then I could see, like, I would go there, but I know this thing and that's going to help hold me back. Get that. But otherwise, you don't want to chance smelly bits. You don't.
So at the dinner, I wrote down, Nog for president, because he could probably win.
Okay. So,
president of America, not...
I'm going to be a Nog apologist at the moment.
that was the thing I read, was a lot of the responses was like, it felt like Jake, when they buddied back up, was kind of like, well, that's cool that you're terrible to people. I can look past that.
No, I'm going to be a Nog apologist here, not because he's terrible to people. I'll be a less of a Nog apologist in that scene. But in the date scene, I'm going to be a Nog apologist because he makes the point of, I just asked her to cut my meat. I didn't even ever chew it, which is what's traditional. So you see Nog already making some allowances away from his culture he was raised in to try to fit better into the culture he's in. And while he is not there yet in terms of where he should be, and it's gross that he would even ask her to cut his food. I don't excuse that. But on the other hand, he is a teenager. His character is, even though the actor's not. And he did try to compromise from the long-held cultural beliefs he had. So I give him some credit for that. Him blaming Jake, less so perhaps.
Yeah.
But I get the perspective of, I compromised on my position. If this went wrong, this is you, because you didn't compromise and meet me halfway. Or maybe my position would have been correct in the first place and I shouldn't have compromised at all. Either way, trying to meet your position didn't work.
Yeah. Well, and my thing was, and maybe this points to something else. It points to that Jake maybe isn't that into Leanne as I would have been, or I feel like I would have been, because he's more concerned about Nog than Leanne. They never even meet. She's never even in it after the dinner, is she? She even in it? I think that's it.
No, dinner was her final scene.
Yeah, I'm like, and I mean, I'm biased because I want to see more Lark Voorhees, but yeah. So I'm like, Jake, come on, let's focus here. But
I mean, it would have been great if Lark Voorhees was reoccurring and over several seasons as Jake ongoing girlfriend instead of this one-off. I would have totally approved of that. And I liked Leanne more. I never disliked Lisa Turtle. I liked Lisa Turtle. I liked Leanne more. I thought she came across as more sensible, whereas I felt like Lisa Turtle at times was flighty, at times was superficial. Not always. They let her get some depth from time to time, but Leanne came across as somebody with character and depth right off the board. And credit to Lark Voorhees for performing it that way.
Yeah.
Skipping some more scenes to my next, for this plot, Jake talking to Ben. And Ben Sisko coaching Jake on culture and defending Nog. Again, he does not... Ben Sisko was a Nog apologist, which is probably why I don't feel bad about it, of saying, you guys have different cultures, but I love Ben Sisko saying, you've got a friendship. And Jake's like, you didn't approve of us being friends. And Ben's like, no, I didn't, but I was wrong.
Yes.
We're now 2.5 years into this friendship. You don't just throw it away. And everything about that conversation, everything about that scene, it was him being a good father. It was Ben Sisko showing evolution. It was Jake getting the parenting he needed. It was showing that Nog was compromising and that Nog has redeeming qualities, or his father, Jake's father, wouldn't argue to keep him. There's so much about that scene that Ben Jake scene is, if I were naming my favorite scenes of the season, that scene would probably be up there.
That part was really good. Again, and I'm being the dead horse now. Like, why didn't he ask his dad about Leanne? But I think my last note on this is I can't remember what Jake says, something like, you're a Ferengi, and Nog says, yeah, the lobes were a dead giveaway.
That's a great line. Jake coming up with a plan to get his attention because Nog's not going to sit and talk to him, and getting Odo to arrest them was a great plan. Love it. I know Rene Auberjonois had almost nothing to do this episode, but he made the most out of the Jake Odo scene.
Yes.
Did you notice the pretense that Odo throws in the rig for is they robbed a Tholian? And Nog says, I don't even know what a Tholian is.
Like.
Which original series reference. Figured you'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
Love that there are communication with Tholians, and apparently a Tholian's visited DS9 at this point.
Yeah.
Love knowing that. I did like that they came up with no double dating. I think that's a reasonable compromise for this friendship. I also put A+ of Odo leaves them there, and they're calling, Odo! And he's not coming back. Like, yes, Odo agrees to help, but he doesn't have time for your childish bullcrap.
That was funny too.
It was good comic relief. Again, I would have liked this episode better played out as an A plot in a different episode rather than put as the B plot in this one. Because we've covered a fifth of my notes, a fourth of my notes.
Oh. The
rest of it gets so intense that I get the argument of let's put a comic relief in, but I don't think they should have.
Yeah.
I think it was a mistake. Teleplay. was by Ron D. Moore, who we love, but
Yes.
story was by Christian Ford and Roger Soffer. Christian Ford has 7 show credits. Only Star Trek credit is story by for this episode. Also story credits for Kazam, the movie starring Shaquille O'Neal. He was the writer of that. Writing the TV series Final Days of Planet Earth and Category 7 End of the World. Kazam, this was his first credit. Kazam was his second, and then he gets 5 more after that. Roger Soffer, same credits. Kazam, Category 7. He has 8 instead of 7, but still number 1 and 2 are the same. I think they had some good ideas. I do wonder if maybe they only pitched the Brielle story and Ron D. Moore had to add in the Jake and Dog for logistical reasons. We have to use Carrick Lofton so many episodes a season.
Yeah.
It just disappoints me they stuck it in.
You talked about how little Odo was in. I forgot that he just had the quick thing. And then Dax is just in for that very last scene, which is also a nice scene. But I'm like,
Dax is the only person that's in the episode less than Odo is Dax.
Yeah,
and the only person had an easy week. Both of them is Quark.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. Yeah, he just had the one moment. Yep.
Let's go back to where we left off on the Brielle story, where they first say they're gonna. Bashir's revived him because he's a genius doctor, and he talks about putting him in a coma. And Kira says, like, for hours or for days, and Bashir says, or weeks or months or years, or maybe Bashir says for hours or days, and Kira says the longer. But I have to know, and this makes me think of Star Trek V, where Dr. McCoy says, oh, well, if I just had my father hang on like another year, we would have a cure. In the 24th century, do they routinely put people in stasis for months or years? Are there warehouses of people in stasis waiting cures? That doesn't make sense to me. Like, all their friends and relations die off and they're just sitting in a warehouse in stasis? That does not make sense. Days, hours and days I get. Like, if you want to do some research, hours, a couple days. But when you talk about even maybe weeks, as long as you're going to stay on the case and work it, months and years, we're beyond. I don't find that acceptable or realistic. I can't believe any other doctor in Starfleet is shipping people to the warehouse to be put in stasis for years. And if they are, I want a TV movie or some episodes about that because I want to see what that part of the future is like.
The way Bashir pitches it initially is, I think you're right. And he may have said months, but in my mind, I think, and especially with the way the episode plays out, I think he's like, oh, we'll do the research and we'll figure out how to cure it. And then as the episode goes along, you realize, like, oh, he doesn't necessarily, obviously there isn't like we'll find it and figure out what it is. And that's where I thought we were going to go initially. And so now rewinding it, I think what he was saying was like, well, days or weeks, because after that, then, if we don't have it figured out by then. But
then Kira said months and years, and Bashir agreed.
It is interesting, and then gets into, and I had to look up the Terry Schiavo case because I'm like, that was later, and it was 98, but I mean we're obviously those situations were happening even before then, but so this gets very into I wrote down when he's explaining the whole thing to Burrell, like, this is very informed consent, and it makes sense because where we go later with it, and so
you could almost do an alternate episode that is still including the Jake and Dog subplot and the Wynn negotiation plot, but we end Barial's thing here where he's put in stasis, and then we do a separate episode where Bashir's trying to heal him.
Yeah. Well, and on the stasis thing, there, I don't think Michael Jackson is, but so at least for a while, Ted Williams, the baseball player, his head is somewhere
with Walt Disney.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So once they figure that out,
most of the people that put themselves in cryogenic, those bodies have been destroyed. Like that's there's not a bunch of bodies of old people waiting. Like that science is falling apart. Those companies have gone bankrupt. The bodies have been discarded. It's not good. It's not the future they were paying. They were being scammed out of money for.
So Futurama is nonsense.
It is, unfortunately. Barial needs better work-life balance. If he's like, nope, just keep shooting me up with drugs. I'm gonna do my work, no matter if it kills me. dude, I've never liked you less than when you're saying that. And maybe that's my anti-capitalism behavior. I know this
Yeah,
isn't for profit. This is for the good of his people.
sure.
But I still think,
But
even for the good of his people, why doesn't he have an aide? Or why aren't there reports that Kai Wynn could read? It should not have to be you personally. And if it is between you and
yes,
this one Cardassian, then you bring that Cardassian into the sickbay, not Wynn, and say, look, I may have limited time. We've done all these months. Tell me what your most important parts are, because we're done. I'm not gonna.
I mean,
It was bad work-life balance. There are
yeah,
ways to handle it. A lot of ways to handle it that would be better.
it makes me think, in our world and even in the Star Trek world, Next Generation, whatever, there's always teams of diplomats. There's not just one person, and that's the one area of that I feel like was kind of a false construction. Was like, well, I'm only going to do this and da da da, but maybe since
two individuals connecting and making a back channel relationship that they could then build a larger negotiation on. I buy that.
Yeah, that part I get. Yes.
Saying Bareil would have an aide helping him, or he would be taking notes.
Yes.
Or if those two have formed a bond that's that dependent, you bring the Cardassian in and say, you got 30 minutes to finalize this.
Right. And you would think if they had formed that bond, it would have that impact on him as
right.
The
Cardassian
as well.
It fell a little flat in that regard. Oh man, I really loved this episode, and now I'm talking myself out of it. And when I told you I remember these episodes so well, I did not remember loving this episode. I was like, I remember it, it's not great. But as I was watching it, the emotional impact of this episode was landing so hard for me. I think if we just judge it on the emotional impact, this episode is an A. Solid A. Yeah. But as we start to pick apart the logic, it starts falling down the ranking. That's rough.
Was my main. It's bigger than a nit, but it's because again, I wrote Bashir is not effing around with the Hippocratic Oath, and then more. He goes further with it, and the scene with him and Kai Wynn where he's like, "I know why you're really concerned about this." I'm like, "Yeah, you're going toe to toe with Louise Fletcher, and this is great." That was a great scene too, and
Bashir is the hero doctor to selfish Wynn. Yeah. I still think Wynn's part in this was complex, and I think if it wasn't Louise Fletcher, it would be hard to communicate that. But I think she valued Bareil for his skills, but I also think she valued him personally. And while she wanted him for the negotiations, and she was willing to sacrifice his life for the negotiations, I also think she regretted that he died. I think he was a valuable aid to her. Surprisingly, it seemed like from a couple of appearances we had after the election that's the new dynamic they had. Well, and I do think she will grieve. I think her priorities aren't that grieving is number one or his life is number one. But I think there's a complexity there that Louise Fletcher sells.
Well, and if he hadn't been valuable to her, he wouldn't have been around, period. I'm not saying he would have been dead. She would have just been like, I think we're done here. You can move on. Yeah. Or found a way to push him out.
When she says this Cardassian peace deal will die with Bareil if he dies, that's the part of the episode where I know when I first saw this, I'm like, oh, he's going to live.
Yeah.
Because the peace deal's not going to die, so he's going to live. What part of this, there are probably multiple parts. When did you think in this episode he was going to die? They first told you he was dead?
No, I knew he was coming back, but...
see, when they first told you, the first time I saw this, I bought it.
Yeah.
Then later, when they said the peace deal dies with him, I was sure he was going to live. But then, of course, first time I saw this, I was surprised they killed him.
Yeah, because I thought when they revive him and then they're using the positronic thing or whatever, I'm like, okay.
I think so much story time keeping him alive makes you think they're going to save him. Next Gen would have saved him.
Yeah, and then like after that, they come back and they're pretty much like the look on Bashir's face. I'm like, okay, this is just buying time. That somewhere in there is when I'm like, yeah,
yes. But that's all in Alexander Siddig's performance.
Yes.
If you're just judging it based on past Star Trek track record.
Oh yeah.
This is one of those episodes that sets DS9 apart from its predecessors.
Yeah, and and it creates a great moment, at the end.
And you mentioned Alexander Siddig going toe to toe with Louise Fletcher. and holding his own against her, which I
Yeah.
fully agree with. Alexander Siddig proved his mettle. I loved Bashir in this episode. If there was any doubt still from his early days of being a terrible character, that's gone by the end of this episode. Them arguing over the lying. When he goes to meet her in the conference room and she says, "Are you going to kick me out of this room too?" And he says, "It hadn't occurred to me." And she accepts him. Like, all of that is so damn good. And then he asks her to lie and she calls him on it. And he's like, "My concern is my patient."
Yep.
And then we get into patient's rights where she's like, "But shouldn't it be his choice, not yours or mine?" And she's right. They're both right and they're both wrong. And that's what makes that scene so damn good. These two actors. So the two scenes in this episode, I would put among my favorite of the season or the series. Maybe not series, season for sure. The Ben schooling Jake and Wynn and Bashir going toe to toe in the conference room. Two best scenes of the episode, hands down.
And then she's like, "I'm not gonna forget what you said," and he's like, "Neither am I." I'm like, "Ooh."
Well, and that comes right after he calls her a coward and accuses her, or no, she calls him a coward. No, he calls her a coward. And he accuses her of just wanting a scapegoat, which I don't think is true. I don't think it's true. I think it's partially true.
But
I think it's partially true.
Yes.
But I don't think it's the whole story. I think she would rather have him alive. And yeah, I do think she is going to avoid taking the blame. If the choice was between taking the blame and him dying, she would let him die. I don't dispute that. I'm just saying I also think she's hoping for an outcome where he survives. Still.
When we get through the conference room, then when we're getting another conversation about, well, whose life is it anyway? A movie
with the irreversible brain damage.
The play Dreyfus was in the movie, whose life is it anyway? But yeah, that whole thing, that whole conversation, and then it's like, ripped from the headlines. That's when I started thinking of Terry Schiavo and.
That was after this, though.
It was, yeah. Although I wonder, there's the Seinfeld episode where Kramer sees the movie, The Other Side of the Mountain, about the crippled skier, but he only watched the first half, and he goes and gets power of attorney for Elaine's gonna be his power of attorney because she's gonna. Oh,
that's a 1975 film.
Yes. Do not.
Terry Schiavo was 2000. She died in 2005. That was W. Bush era.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. But I thought those were really good conversations or fascinating things. And it's like, well, and then it got into, because and that's what made me think of Schiavo, is that Kira kind of changes her tune. She went from like, we got to do whatever she went from, she went from let's not do it to, no, we got to keep him alive. And
well, it was the scene where she sided with Wynn. When they said they had irreversible brain damage, he won't regain consciousness, but we can replace part of his brain with a positronic data style brain. And Kira sided with Wynn, that I was like, oh, because at that point you're like, okay, it's our heroes versus Wynn. But when Kira sides with Wynn against Bashir, that's where it gets real complex.
Yes.
If you didn't already get it from the Bashir-Wynn confrontation.
Yep. That's the part. I'm like, wait a minute, where are you going here? And then she comes back the other way, and it's like,
Well, but then you see Bariah with the robot voice. The scene where he's robot voice, that's creepy. And that's when you again switch your allegiance to Bashir if you had wavered, because we love Kira and we trust her.
And his last speech about it wouldn't be him. And I mean, Bariah even says, like, it doesn't feel like I'm me. And that gets into
I don't feel your touch feels more like a memory than
and that gets into even more things of these days, our modern times, are when we live now, because especially for older folks that are on even name your drugs, but that are keeping them alive, or if it's to help their memory. But a lot of them, they say that their memories are better, but their sense of feeling and everything, that they're constantly in a fog, which is kind of what he's saying there too, which is interesting. So I love that.
You're talking me back into loving this episode.
Yeah. I just, and without, I didn't think they got heavy-handed with it either.
No.
It didn't feel heavy-handed. It felt like, no, this is what happens in the moment. And so I think, because I think there weren't stingers or anything like that, or, I guess they, in a way, they could be speeches. I mean, like the line, like, I'm not going to forget either. but that's just people going back and forth. I didn't. It's not a tagline. I mean, I loved it, but
this is an original series episode, and you have 7 or 8 more minutes to fill. You do make those speeches.
Yes, yeah, that's good. Yeah,
and I'm not faulting the original series; it was the style of the time.
Sure,
but you did not have time once you shorten the episodes like this.
But and so Bashir has all those different moments, and so I'll just throw in the Star Wars part of the podcast here. When Bashir's like he'll be more machine than man, Palpatine was like, let's do it. I don't, because he didn't care about Anakin, obviously, and for sure Anakin had no choice in that. He did not have a choice. He was fine with that.
Anakin murdered a bunch of children, so we don't have sympathy.
What's that?
So I was surprised. I'd forgotten. I assumed the peace treaty did die with him. I was surprised that they actually signed the peace treaty.
Yeah.
That's clearly not going to be the last word on Cardassia versus Bajor. They do not wrap it up mid-season 3 because this is the halfway point. We're done. Bajor and Cardassians are friends now for the end of the series. No. But that's probably why I was surprised, because I'm remembering other antagonistic things that happened. I'm like, wait, they signed a peace treaty? I forgot about that.
Well, and I will say that those negotiations to go with Rip from the Headlines reminded me of things I've read about, well, really any war, but like Vietnam, like we left a bunch of equipment there, and I don't know, I'm pretty sure we just left it there.
I will say we've barely met the Dominion, and that's the other shoe that hasn't dropped. Once that fully drops, that changes every dynamic on the board.
Yeah.
So if we didn't have the Dominion, I could see this moving on. Even though it's like the Nazis and the Jews signed a peace treaty, really?
And that's where it gets
that's a little rough. That's a little hard to swallow.
Yeah, and
the Cardassians oppressed the Bajorans for decades, and you're telling me this couple of meetings? I know it was months of Brile and the Cardassian working, but it still feels too easy.
Well, and I guess that's and that's a good thing. I think we talked about TOS being very United States, Russia, China kind of thing, Cold War thing. This is more of like, because when
post-Holocaust,
when World War II ended, we were just like, U.S. whatever the Allies were like, here's how this is going to work for you, Germany, and here's how this is going to work for you, Japan. There was no real negotiation. It was just like, here's what's happening. This is more of the modern conflicts again of like, no, it's not that cut and dry. This is how this is going to work. So,
I do want to mention our Cardassian Leggett Turrell was played by Andrew Prine, who was previously in an episode of The Next Generation. Season 6, he played Administrator Suna in Frame of Mind. Don't remember that at all. He's best known for Gettysburg, Lords of Salem, The Miracle Worker, and Eliminators. 186 credits. Yeah. This is a one-off part for him.
He just passed just a little over 2 years ago. Usually I tell you guys not to look at the Wikipedia page, and this still isn't necessarily a good thing, but if you're into true crime podcast or any kind of true crime thing, go to his Wikipedia page. There's an interesting item about a woman he dated, and I didn't go any further than the Wikipedia entry on it, but I recommend you go check out his Wikipedia page on that. Some interesting stuff there. So definitely disturbing, and definitely you're not going to like him as much either, but it's not as bad as what I usually try and steer you away from. So speaking of not great, so as soon as Burrell passed away, before Kira's speech, I wrote, man, when the station finds out that Kira's single, everybody's going to be driving hard to the hoop on that one.
Well, Kira is pregnant for the better part of a season coming up, so.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, there you go.
I'm going to tell you whose baby it is, but she does get pregnant.
But but then she starts doing that. Like when she starts talking to him, I was like, okay, that's cool. And then they kept it going. And that's when I just was like, I didn't think, but they got me when she kept going. Cause I was like, they're not, I was like, roll credits. And nope, they got me. And
it was rough.
Yeah.
Dex comforting Bashir was really sweet. I liked that scene. Yeah. It's nice to see that Bashir's creepiness, it's developed into friendship. He doesn't deserve her friendship, but I like their friendship.
Yeah.
Fork creating the Kaiwin dessert was fun.
Yes.
Lighthearted moment in the main dark plot.
Him offering it to her on his finger, I was just like,
that's the thing. I've created this dessert for you. Let me stick my finger in it and hand it to you. And then he also mentioned it had tongue sauce.
Yeah. Which
gross. Gross pork. I'm sure Ferengi liked tongue sauce and eating off fingers, but
yeah. I don't think anywhere in the universe is that acceptable, but
I mean, if you're attracted to the person eating off their fingers, not a big deal.
Yeah,
the tongue sauce, the tongue sauce, that just feels awful.
Good. I had an alternate episode, and I should have got this in earlier when we were talking about it. My alternate episode is he comes out of stasis 30 years later.
Oh.
And what's happened
in New Trek?
Who's there? How old are they? It's old Nana visitor and all that stuff, and she's moved on. Or obviously she's moved on, but it's one of those kind of things of like, well, I'm still the same age. Well, I guess he would age too, but in my mind he doesn't. But still, waking up 30 years later, like
he's in stasis, he would not age. It's not a coma. That's like being.
Oh frozen. Yeah. So yeah, it is kind of the thing of like, well, everything here has changed.
It's like Scotty and the transporter.
Yeah. So that's my alternate. And more on just the idea of the people that, Kira and the people he was close to and what all the things that have changed, and he's still the same, quote unquote. And that's my last note.
So I had several alternate episodes. One, seeing the Cardassians and Bajorans as allies going forward would have been really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it fell apart legit in this episode, or if it fell apart later. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of things you could do differently with that treaty.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, I've got another note in that, like, after half of his brain has been replaced with positronic, there's a scene where they consider replacing the other half.
Yeah.
And Bashir refuses. And Wynn sides with Bashir against Kira there. So it's a change up of the dynamic earlier where Wynn and Bashir join the same side. And I know part of it's selfish because she got what she wanted. But again, I still think she'd prefer he lives. But I think at that point, she actually is, for the first time in that we've seen her, falling back on her faith and her beliefs and being like, child, it's better to let him die.
Yes, I agree. And I think that's where Kira goes into, which, a lot of people follow that mode. Like, no, I want them to still be here, even though it's not them.
Another alternate episode, we just have Robot Barial for a season or two.
Oh, and our guy doesn't have to change his acting style at all.
And then we bring in Brett Spiner as Data as a guest spot to connect with him. Or Lore. Whatever. Or Lore. It's sad that didn't happen. I do think, I don't know that we've ever mentioned Barial's full name on this podcast, but in honor of his death, Barial Antos is his name. Because remember, Bajorans, it's their last name they use as their family name comes first instead of last. Barial Antos, so Antos would have been his personal name. And I did say we see him one more time, but it's very different. It's a very different circumstance. Gotcha. So as far as we're concerned, this character in this arc of Barial Antos is done. And I'm a little bit sad. He wasn't the best actor.
Yeah.
His scenes were mostly just sexy smut, but
yeah.
I'm sad for Kira. I'm sad for Wynn. I'm sad for the conflict with Wynn, that we have this better Vedic. I'm sad for a lot of reasons to lose his presence on the show and that he's now out of the equation.
Yeah.
Also directed by Reza Badiyi, Badiyi. We've talked about Reza before, so we're not going to get into him now. Let's get to the rankings. Who is your shady character in life support?
Kai Wynn, just because I wasn't believing her. I still wasn't trusting her. Well, even at the end, I'm still not trusting her in general. But yeah, I thought she was up to something, and she kind of was, but she wasn't up to as bad of things as I thought.
So I actually thought she was more sincere than usual in this episode. Yeah. So I chose Jake just for his ruse of getting Nog locked up. Because I didn't have a good shady for this one. I really thought this was an episode where most people were pretty upfront. So
yeah.
Who was your annoyance?
Nog at dinner.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Nog at dinner was awful. But when he explained his culture and the compromises he's made, I didn't hate him. My annoyance was Barial, the work-life balance and the insisting on taking the drugs instead of getting himself healed. Barial all the way. Sacrifice for your people for a little bit, but again, let's say everything else plays out the same. Write a few notes down for Wynn, then let yourself go into stasis. Don't kill yourself.
Only be a martyr in quotation marks. Don't be an actual martyr.
No. Who are you having a drink with?
It's her only appearance. It's got to be Leanne.
I mean, I'm choosing Bashir because this was the first true hero Bashir. We've had some hero moments, but this was the first true hero Bashir episode. Alexander Siddig was wonderful in it, and I just want to... And he went through some rough stuff. He never wavered on his morals and his positions, but I know that had to weigh on him personally, and so I will be happy to have a drink with him and commiserate.
Speaking of Bashir and drinks, what do you think they were drinking in that last scene?
The blue stuff was definitely Romulan ale.
Okay. Well, I guess we've talked about Romulan ale is not as...
It's illegal, but at this point, they're all getting it so freely. I mean, McCoy used to get it
10 years ago. Everyone,
in fact, it's probably not illegal anymore. They probably had some deal at this point. Ranking the episode, I definitely want to put this towards the top. Number 1 right now is Defiant, which was the Thomas Riker episode. Better or worse than Defiant?
I think I'd go above.
Above Defiant?
I think so, yeah.
I think I would too, but that makes this number 1 for the season, which I did not expect. So, if you're cool with putting it number 1, it's number 1, and I would not have expected that going in.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that's good is great.
There's some really, really good stuff in this episode.
Yeah.
I'm not going to argue. So, right below Defiant is the Search Part 1. I would definitely rank it above that. So, yeah. We'll put it number 1. Next week, Voyager. Time and again, the Voyager crew discovers a planet which recently suffered a horrific catastrophe. Upon investigation, Janeway and Paris are sent back in time before the disaster and are faced with the decision of whether to try to stop it. Yes, my friends, it is a Prime Directive episode. Until then, live long.
Yeah, don't Vedic Barile it and prosper.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?